Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about Pakistan's talks with IMF. Pakistan is likely to reach an agreement with IMF, and this agreement would release $1.1 billion, which is part of around $7 billion deal. How this would be impacting Pakistan's economy, what are the future prospects, we would be discussing in today's program. We will be also talking about the hurdles that have been faced by Pakistan so far in today's program, and how we can structure Pakistan's economy for durable results. To discuss this and more, I'm joined in the studios by Mr. Sheharyar Khan, who is an economist and senior analyst. Welcome to the program. And with him, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Sajid Amin, who is economist and analyst. Welcome to the program, sir. So, Mr. Sheharyar, let me start with you. This is an important, issue when we talk about IMF and the ongoing talks that have been going on for a while now. Let's talk about the challenges that Pakistani economy has been facing and why we needed this bailout package.
Maryam, thank you so much for inviting me today. So, as of the situation right now, we are very near to signing a staff level agreement with the IMF. Currently, according to the State Bank and the discussions with the IMF that are going on, we are short of like $6 to $7 billion that the IMF has basically asked for assurities from Pakistan to get like assurities from the friendly countries whether this financing needs will be met or not. So these financing.
So what is the situation of these assurities that has been asked by the IMF? What is the situation on that? Has State Bank of Pakistan met all the assurities or the compliances that were asked by the IMF?
So there are like two things in that sense. From the State Bank's point of view, Pakistan has to pay a tranche of $3 billion in external loans. That has to be done by June 2023. Yes. 4 billion of those total loans, which is about $7 billion, 4 billion has been basically rolled over by the friendly countries. Now the financing needs, that's like a separate thing. That is coming from friendly countries like UAE, Saudi, Qatar,
China.
And China has already rolled over the loans that they had given us. So these assurities have been provided to us from the friendly countries, and now we're taking this discussion further. And now that these assurities have been provided, now we are expecting to sign the staff level agreement in the coming weeks.
Right. So, Mr. Sajid Amin, when we talk about these ongoing talks with IMF, how do you see these economic challenges that we have to go to IMF again and again?
Yes, I think this is a very fundamental question actually. If we have just a number, we are into 23rd program in 70 years more or less. So it means every 3 years we have a IMF program actually. And I'm expecting, and many experts believe, that we must be starting already negotiations for 24th program because we need a serious IMF program to solve our economic problems. Before I go into detail, I think my advice to government will be, as an expert or sort of a student of economy, we must not shy to go to IMF if we need IMF. And you have an example of Bangladesh. I mean, they're doing much better than many of the neighbors, $45 billion sort of foreign reserves. But just they had some sort of a sort of hit from the Ukraine war in terms of commodity prices, and preempting, they reached to IMF and they got IMF program already in place.
Right, but when we talk about IMF programs, there are certain conditions attached to these programs.
Absolutely.
How do you view those conditions, and Pakistan meeting those conditions? Like you earlier mentioned that Pakistan shouldn't shy away from it, but obviously we have seen that previous government was shying away from going directly to IMF.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is where this program actually started, sort of on a bad note. We delayed it. I mean, the PTI government, when it came to power, it knew that it had to go to IMF. But given the political campaigns, particularly on that, going to IMF mean corruption and many other things, so they delayed it, sort of. And they did the same mistake that this government did actually. They tried to go to IMF from a strong position, taking bilateral friendly countries first on board and then going to IMF. so that we have a strong position, and this didn't happen actually. So we delayed. Similarly, 8 or 9 months was delayed in the IMF program. But just one thing on the conditions actually, I think we need to understand what are IMF conditions actually.
Yes, of course.
It is actually the commitment of the government which gives to IMF before negotiating a program. You know, IMF is only mandated for stabilization, because any government goes to IMF when it is an ICU, economy is an ICU actually. So once it goes, IMF would ask that, okay, we are there to support, but how you would solve these structural problems which are bringing you back again and again to us.
And how exactly IMF is going to monitor all these economic reforms?
These are the reviews which we have, a quarterly reviews.
Right.
We are into 9th reviews. So the conditions are actually which government has itself committed in its letter of intent to IMF. What I am saying is that these are not conditions of IMF actually. These are the commitments we have made them. And I think saying that these are the IMF conditions or
so
this is
we
IMF's
have to actually
agenda.
implement those conditions.
Exactly.
Right.
And the delay that is coming in this staff level agreement actually, this is more or less rooted in these, not only this government, it's every government. We do commit. If we have a 70-year history, we have an IMF program, 3 years, we implement conditions, but then there is an election year, we reverse all those commitments we have done. The trust gap is there, and right now the delay that is coming from the IMF is for 3 reasons actually. The one is that political instability made government to delay reaching to IMF and starting the negotiations. 7th and 8th review was delayed by around 5 months, and we understand that it was a new government, political instability was on the peak, there was no clarity that is there election before October or not, so it delayed going to IMF. 9th review is delayed by around 2.5 months. Again started late. And now I think we are on a positive note on IMF. Almost all the major conditions priors have been met. And I think this staff level agreement is delayed actually this trust gap. And most recent example of that trust gap was by the reversal of petrol prices and the energy prices by the PTI government when there was a vote of no confidence coming. So instead of doing the committed that going along with the global market prices, at those time, due to Ukraine war, you know, the global market prices, oil prices were shooting up. But what did that government do was reversed, and not only reversed, it freezed actually those prices till next 4 months, which was quite sort of deviation from what we have committed. That trust gap is really now pushing IMF that we won't sign SLA until unless you meet all those conditions in prior to signatures.
So there was already a trust deficit.
Exactly, and we started already late. So this is actually, but I think more or less the conditions are met. Right now I think there is 3 reasons which state IMF is looking for to before final signatures, which as you said your introduction as well, we're expecting it soon now.
Of course.
So one is the, okay, please.
Right. Please continue.
No, I think 3 conditions which are sort of slight delaying. IMF is still confirming that is the rupee rate to dollar, the exchange rate is on market driven or not, or there is some element of not opening LCCs, arresting the demand for dollars through these measures, import control, something like. So that is one reason that IMF is sort of confirming. The second I think is on the energy tariff. It is sort of waiting for the approval from the parliament on permanent energy tariff. And third I think is again the external financing, which more or less we are meeting. So I think we have still homework on exchange rate and tariff.
Right. But Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about IMF loan programs, the critics of the program say that they come with certain, social and economic costs for the borrowing countries. What can Pakistan do to minimize those costs that come along with these sort of programs?
Maryam, that's a very interesting question that you just asked. So IMF is technically a lender of the last resort. And if we look at Pakistan's loan history, Dr. Saab has very rightly mentioned in the last 7 decades, Pakistan has basically gone into 23 programs. So obviously there is something structurally wrong with our economy that successive governments have not been able to adequately or efficiently implemented any structural reforms that Pakistan does not need to go to IMF over and over again. That said, when we talk about the economic framework and the economic philosophy behind IMF, what we have to understand is that IMF basically works with the neoliberal economic model. So according to the neoliberal economic model, IMF does not allow any other countries, or it doesn't recommend those countries to have any subsidies. They basically recommend free market systems. Other than that, they basically advocate for fiscal austerity. And then they also go with the floating exchange rates. So the government doesn't control anything using the state bank or any centralized policies, and most of the policies are market based. So a lot of critics, and I'm talking about famous economists like Joseph Stiglitz, who was also the president of the World Bank, and he's a Nobel laureate when it comes to economics. He basically wrote a book in 2002 called Globalization and Its Discontents. And Joseph Stiglitz criticized IMF's policies when it comes to development policies related to developing countries. And he basically criticized the structural adjustment programs that IMF advocates, and he basically says that the poorest of the poor basically bear the brunt of IMF's policies. IMF's policies are inflationary in nature. And when these subsidies are removed, the social protection that the poor of the developing countries are getting from the government, they are removed, and these people are the ones that will suffer the most. And he gave various examples. So that economic debate or economic philosophy aside, Pakistan right now doesn't have the liberty to get into this debate. When it comes to Pakistan's condition, we can
discuss
Greece, we can discuss Zambia, we can discuss Sri Lanka, as Dr. Saab rightly said, we can discuss even Bangladesh. Pakistan's problems are very separate. Given the fact that we've gone into the IMF programs 23 times, there's a massive internal reflection that Pakistan needs to do, and basically go into the structural reforms that successive governments, because of political backlash, due to the tough measures that need to be taken, a lot of governments have basically not taken the actions that were required from them.
Right, they have not taken the actions required by them, and I also want to discuss about what led to the suspension of IMF loan program previously, but we have to Welcome back. We are discussing Pakistan's ongoing talk with IMF and how Pakistan is going to revive and restructure its economy. We are joined by Mr. Hamayoun to discuss more about it. He is a senior analyst. Welcome to the program, Mr. Hamayoun. When we talk about these IMF programs that Pakistan keep on going to frequently, what led to the suspension of this IMF loan program previously? Mr. Hamayoun.
Thank you, Maryam. I guess we have a very able panel today. Dr. Sajid Amin is an expert economist. He could give you the economic reason, but I will give you the political reasons of this particular program, which was suspended in the last couple of months, and this new government is in negotiation with the IMF staff level agreement is supposed to be signed, hopefully, in the coming days. The reason why the previous government, when Prime Minister Imran Khan was leaving in last few months of his tenure, despite the fact that the previous government had signed an agreement with IMF and they were supposed to lower or gradually lower the subsidies on different things, including petrol, including gas, including hiking the price of electricity. What he did was, before leaving, he gave 200 billion rupees subsidy more on petrol as well, against the wishes of the IMF. Now, that was particularly one of the reasons which led to the suspension. And then, obviously, in the previous section, we have heard a lot what are the structural changes within Pakistani economy, why we could not enhance our revenue generation for many years, why there is a current account deficit, why there is a circular debt issue within our government. Population is a big issue. The recent floods are basically another one of the God-sent and man-made calamity at the same time, which aggravated Pakistani economic situation. And then there is more import rather and less export from the Pakistani side. The industry was not performing well. So there are like host of reasons which led to this suspension.
So how would this IMF program would impact Pakistan's economy in short term and long term?
As of now, I guess getting into this program back would give us a breathing space for next couple of months. But there is a huge debate within Pakistan that it's not, this is our 23rd program. And we keep going back to this thing and then going back to square one. Because once we get this bailout package, we get some breathing space, but we do not do the structural changes. I think this time around there's a realization on the Pakistani side that unless and until we put our house in order, this cannot sustain. Our population is hugely increasing at a tremendous pace, which basically will overthrow all the policies that you have made and all the planning that you have done for this particular year or so. So unless and until we control certain aspects of our population, certain aspect of our agriculture growth, certain aspect of our export-oriented economy, we cannot do much. But this particular program probably will give us a breathing space. We just need $1.1 billion, not necessarily that this is going to help too much, but this idea of reviving this program, then international lenders will have more confidence, business-oriented commodities will have more confidence in Pakistan's ability to pay back our loans. So this is somehow going to give us a political leverage, in my opinion.
Right. So, Mr. Sajid, when we talk about, of course, this would give a breathing space to Pakistan's economy, but what other measures Pakistan could take and should be taking to improve the economy, other than, of course, going to the IMF for this loan agreement?
Thank you. I think let me just summarize what Hamayoun said in just one sentence. And he's rightly said, Pakistan's way or door to coming out of this crisis only goes through IMF. It is the only IMF at this point of time. That is so much impact of IMF on economy. I think going forward, it's a very fundamental question and we really don't have clear answers over the last 7 decades. But I think we need to work on 3 things simultaneously. The one is on the political side, the politics. We do understand that you cannot separate politics from economy. It's always a political economy. But I think there is a minimum agenda that our political parties can agree on, that we should not do politics on economy. We should not do politics on petrol prices. We should not do politics on privatization.
That is, of course,
so that is the politics. And I think so this is the word charter of economy, whatever you call it. We need to agree on minimum agenda. And I think I see a positive hope for at least 3 reasons on this front. The one is that there is now a realization that if there is no economy, there is no politics.
Of course.
And every government is feeling now, every party is feeling now.
And we are seeing this, trend on the global stage as well.
Exactly. And second, I think this is a blessing in disguise. Maybe it has tested our nerves actually, but it has really given a good message that our friendly countries, those has always been coming to support us as an alternative to IMF. They didn't come forward this time, and they have really given a clear message that you have to put your house in orders as you have committed with the IMF. So take your reforms. Even you might have heard Saudi Arabia's finance minister speaking at World Economic Forum that even Saudi Arabia has fundamentally changing its position. It will not be giving any cashes now. It will be conditioning it on the reforms. And that I think will push our political parties to agree on this agenda. Third, I think on the political front is that if you see right now, other than one party, almost all parties are in the government. At least they can agree that this is the minimum agenda that we will not do politics on. Unfortunately, if you see in the 70 years what happened, every government, every political party when opposition is opposite to privatization. The moment it goes to the government, it is in favor of privatization. So that is on the political side we need to work, because economy runs in a political situation, in a political context. So that is on the political front. Second, I think which Hamayoun also mentioned and Sheharyar also mentioned, this is the structure of our economic growth. We have to bring in policies to change it from consumption to investment, from import to exports, and we have to strengthen our manufacturing sector, which Hamayoun alluded towards actually. This is a long-term agenda actually, medium to long-term agenda. But one thing that I think is really missing from this all debate in structural reforms, Hamayoun touched on a very important point, that is in the population growth. I think if you compare it with Bangladesh, it did 3 things which actually stand Bangladesh different from Pakistan. And same was done by India in 80s and 90s. Number one, we have to control our population growth rate. Country like Pakistan, which has no fiscal space, which has very limited social spending on health, education, social protection, a population growth rate of above 2%, you can never have a sustainable development or sustainable economy with this population growth. Number two, we need to engage female labor force participation in the labor market. If your 50% is not working, you cannot have any sustainable economic growth. And
of course.
third, I think, is that we need to make SMEs policy our development policy, because it is the SMEs who create economic inclusion, who promote savings, who promote productivity. So I think on three fronts need to work on: the one, political, economic side, and the social and demographic side. All these combination can push Pakistan to develop going beyond this crisis. If you see in current scenario, the biggest risk to Pakistan is the higher economic growth. The moment you touch 4 and 5%, you have a balance of payment crisis. And the longer it prevails, this severe will be the macroeconomic crisis. So we need a fundamental changes. But for that, I think we have to first realize that this is our fault that we go every time to IMF. It is not IMF's fault if it asks you to implement the conditions which you have agreed on.
Of course, very important and pertinent points raised by Mr. Sajid Amin. So Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about all these steps that needs to be taken, one important issue that comes to my mind is transparency in economic policies. What needs to be done to ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the economic policies? Because like Mr. Sajid earlier mentioned, that even the friendly countries are not directly giving cashiers to the countries. So what needs to be done?
Maryam, when it comes to developing long-term economic policies and the structural adjustments that we basically need, the reforms that we basically need to basically put our economy on the right path, that needs a consistent policy intervention, and I personally think that it would take at least a 10-year plan for this economy to get right on track. Now the problem with Pakistan and the way various political parties have been operating, and I really agree with Dr. Saab, that all the political parties have not yet been able to come up with a single point agenda on how to basically come up and build a consensus on the Charter of Economy or any economic policy that the country needs to consistently follow for at least 10 years to basically put Pakistan's economy on the right track. Now, every political party that comes to power, they want to do things differently. A lot of policies that are implemented or drafted or formulated, they generally are not implemented in letter and spirit. And as soon as the next government comes in, they say, okay, this is like something that was done by the previous government, we want to do something different. Now, because of the lack of consistency in policy implementation, Pakistan hasn't been able to get the economy on track.
And what is the role of transparency and accountability in all this, picture?
So the problem with transparency and accountability comes in when we actually implement the policies in letter and spirit. If every time we talk about transparency, every time we talk about transparent governance, every political party has this like backup option to say that our policies were not implemented. How will you hold us accountable when we didn't even get time to basically rule for like the 5 years that were like guaranteed?
Is the basic problem.
I think political instability is like something that all stakeholders in Pakistan would have to come to this agenda, that political stability is the need of the hour, and consistent policy development and implementation. So all stakeholders, political on every spectrum in Pakistan's political economy, they need to come together and they need to formulate a charter that is diligently followed, and this should be beyond economics. Now it's about time that we put our heads together and like take this forward.
Of course, very important. So Mr. Hamayoun, when we talk about resumption of IMF loan program, how do you see that this resumption of program would impact Pakistan's relations with other friendly countries and other international financial institutions?
I think it's going to be breathing space that we are going to get from international financial institution, multilateral donor organization, and friendly countries as well. Dr. Sajid Amin was saying this thing a little while ago that this is a very alarming situation for the first time, that the friendly countries have sort of, if not refused, but like conditioned that if Pakistan gets the IMF loan or revive this package this time, then we will be able to give, because they believe And once we get that and we do those structural changes in our economy, we will be able to repay our loan to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other countries. Except, by the way, when it comes to China, so far China has already given us, in totality, if we speak, $4.3 billion, including $2.3 billion in commercial loans, and then $2 billion in safe deposit before we have even signed the IMF deal. So this is also a very good sign, and that also relates to the second phase of China-Pakistan economic corridor as well. We were talking about controlling population. We were talking about SMEs. I think there needs to be a focus on something which has been lacking for the last 75 years is the agriculture sector of Pakistan, which is basically the feeding basket for the entire 220 million population and the rest of the neighboring countries as well. We provide wheat to Afghanistan as well. Sometimes we import it from other countries, but depending upon if we have a good crop. Then industrialization is something which has been like we were slow to that. So hopefully if something, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Phase 2 kickstarts soon, we would like that the friendly countries would come here and invest here and tap into the potential of cheaper labor, which again, there's another problem here that we have unskilled labor. So we need to train or skill our labor in a way which is which can help these industries to come, and then we can put these people there. And then we need to, this is something very important. For a very long time, our focus has not been on training our labor. So you see, we get one of the largest percentage of our revenues from the remittance from Middle Eastern countries, United States of America, Europe, and other places. Imagine if you have 220, 230 million people, and with the largest chunk of youth population in any country in the world, or particularly in South Asian country, which is somewhere to the tune of 60 to 63 million people, you train them in a way that you export this human resource to the countries where it's needed. It's needed in Europe, it's needed in Middle East, it's needed in other places, but our labor need to be skilled. So in that way, we can do a lot of things in the coming years if we focus more on these aspects.
Right. Mr. Sajid, when we talk about these IMF, of course, loan packages and agreements, we have been witnessing, that there are delays of giving these agreements or bailout packages to other countries as well. So what are the reasons behind those delays?
I mean, there are two types of delays actually. I was talking to Sheharyar as well. The one is that delayed in signing staff level agreement or the final agreements are sort of announcing the programs, that is, of course, it goes on the conditions that are there. Of course, IMF need country to country variations. For example, if it's Sri Lanka, it's a different scenario. It's a post-default program that has altogether very different scenarios. In context of Pakistan, it is a different scenario. It is pre-default situation, and we are there to discuss. So this is on the conditions actually, that how we met those conditions that we have agreed on. But you see in Bangladesh, there was no delays actually. So once you go in time to IMF, you preemptively go, instead of deepening the crisis and then going to IMF, the severe the crisis, the delayed it will be the negotiations, because then there are so many dimensions that needs to be careful on.
But there are some tensions that we are witnessing in Chinese economies with regards to Western economies. Are they also one of the reasons behind these delays?
I think, the realistic answer is that there are some sort of concerns between West and the China, and which can, of course, like multilaterals like IMF, they have their considerations. But I think one good thing that is happening is now that there are two ways realization happening now, the one on the China side and one on the multilaterals and the West as well. On the China side, it is that it cannot be an alternative to IMF and multilaterals. And you see that China did also give a message that first engage with IMF, and we will be there to support you. We are not as an alternate to China, IMF, number one. But I think a more important realization that is on the global level happening is that you cannot have a global financial architecture without engaging China into it. So I think this is a positive sign to me, that the realization is on the both side, the going on. And I see it now, it is more strongly coming out. Even at I've been out in some abroad in a couple of months back, and I was engaged in those discussions actually at a very sort of those who are really the good stakeholders. So there is a realization now that no global system without China is sustainable. Be it lending, be it global financial architecture, be it global financial architecture, the development architecture. At the same time, China is also realizing that it should not and it cannot put as an alternate. And I think this will dilute those concerns gradually going forward. And this is a natural outcome whenever there is a new economic power, political power arising within the existing system. There are some ripples that go, but they gradually be solved. So I see it positively on this one.
Of course, but let's talk about this IMF agreement, how this is going to impact Pakistani citizens.
Yeah, this is the most important question actually at this time actually. They are fundamentally inflationary, but that is not the fault of IMF. Because you give a very tough choice to IMF. Economy or people. For example, if you just go 2 months back, everybody was talking on default. That is it defaulting, Pakistan defaulting. Now IMF had a very strong choice, I mean tough choice. To save country from defaulting or to take care of people actually. So ultimately you have to, if you have a economy, you can take care, number one.
But Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Foreign Minister Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has also criticized IMF for these delays in talks. So how do you see this situation?
Again, I mean, let's see, for example, if I can give you an example that who delayed starting 9th review? Is it the IMF or it is our government actually? So we need to see. As I told, there are two types of delays. The one is that IMF mission was in Pakistan. They had a discussion and then there is a signature delays on staff level agreement that we are facing right now. But when did you start those negotiations? Let's assume we started those negotiations in September.
So timeline is very important when we talk about these discussions.
And I give you one example. In September and October, we have in August, we had 8 billion foreign reserves with the State Bank of Pakistan. But when we started discussions with IMF in January, we had below 3 billion actually. So you can imagine the position that we were trying to engage. So it would have been a different, I mean the currency pressures that we have had August to January, we would have avoided those. I believe that even we would have avoided the GST increase of 1%.
So timeline was very important while going to the IMF, and the release of these packages would also be the timeline that would also be very important.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think the delay right now in staff level agreement, we are also blamed the government, not only this government, as I said earlier, it is started from since the onset of this program. The trust gap we have created, it is pushing IMF not to sign staff level agreement until and unless every condition is met. But just if you can give me 1 minute on the people, that is the most critical actually. I think government need to work on 3 things to protect people from these inflationary pressures. So number one, it should have a very social safety net, active targeted subsidies. Sheharyar alluded towards it. IMF is not asking that don't give subsidies. What IMF is asking is don't give blanket subsidies, unproductive subsidies. Give targeted subsidies. So government should have a Sasta patrol. I have been listening on for rickshaw and for motorcycles. So these kind of social protection and safety measures will be much crucial, number one. Number two, I think the government, and this is where the role of provinces is very critical, that the over profiteering, hoarding, the smuggling needs to be curbed by engaging price control committees and district management committees. I mean, we don't see them anywhere. So this is where the role of provinces is very critical to engage. And third and most importantly, I think the government need to design 1-year growth strategy right now. You cannot wait 10 years. I mean, it's good to have structural plans, but people need help now. And I think this is where we need to identify those sectors. You know, Pakistani people are suffering from 2 sides actually. On the one side, due to these very tight monetary fiscal policies, slow down economy is leaving them unemployed, decreasing their income, the cut in the income, and at the same time we're having history high inflations. So they need also some support in creating livelihoods. And this is where I think the government need to map the sectors which can generate indigenous employments without pushing external. I mean, your traditional sectors.
We will be talking more about this and what needs to be done to revive the economy other than going to IMF and release of this loan agreement that we are discussing. We will be we are talking about Pakistan's ongoing talks with IMF. So, Mr. Hamayoun, when we talk about restructuring of economy, what needs to be done to restructure Pakistan's economy so that we don't have to go to IMF again and again?
Oh, thank you, Maryam. I guess it's a $1 million question. There needs to be a lot of things which needs to be done in order to have a restructuring of our existing disaster that we gotten ourselves into in last couple of years or decades or so. I guess the first thing which I've always emphasized too much, and Dr. Sajid and Sheharyar has also alluded to that, we need to control our population. It's something which is unsustainable. Then we need to have less expenditure on a lot of things, which not only on the government side, but only on other side as well. Then we have big white elephants in our economy, which we continue to subsidize and give loans so that they can sustain themselves, be it state-owned institution, be it state-owned organization, from to other issues as well. Then we need to also focus on our agriculture sector. A country like Pakistan, which is heavily dependent upon agriculture, particularly to the tune of 60 to 70%, we import our pulses, we import fertilizer. In terms of our usage of oil and gas and petroleum, there are very less refineries here. We have been asking other friendly countries to come here and invest here. Our industrialization process has been very slow to take off. So it's like too many different things which we need to do. But as of now, I guess in the earlier question that which you mentioned earlier, you were asking the other panelists, I guess there's also a political side of this on which IMF is sort of like slow to sign the staff agreement with Pakistan. And that's one of the reasons why Prime Minister has also mentioned that the Finance Minister is going to speak with the American ambassador here and probably would like the American Treasury branches to intervene. Reportedly, Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari also met some of these high-level officials in the US and asked their help to do that. We did that. Right now, all the demands, or at least some of the demands which were required by the IMF, Pakistan has met them. We have put a price hike on petroleum and gas products. We've reduced subsidies.
Mr. Sheharyar, when we talk about restructuring of economy, what in your opinion are the specific measures that should be taken by the government?
So I agree with our respected analysts. Most of them have talked about it in great detail. One area where we really need to do reforms is basically the tax sector of Pakistan. If we have a population of over 220 million, according to various analyses and research reports that have come out, less than 1% of Pakistan's population, they actually pay their taxes. Most of the people who pay taxes are the salaried class, and their tax is already deducted before they get their salaries. So there is a fundamental need to reform the tax whole framework that the Pakistan operates in. Another thing that we can basically do is the leakages that we have in our economy. That would, Dr. Saab has clearly pointed out, state-owned enterprises that are non-profitable. And there are many. There are PIA, there's the Karachi Steel Mill, and then Pakistan Railway as well. We have tried over and over again to make them profitable. And privatizing them has always been a very political issue. Various governments have basically set up privatization commissions. There have been questions, there has been blowback, and I personally feel a lot of political parties do not want to take the risk of privatizing these entities. So that is something somewhere these tough decisions have to take place. And I'm also not saying that state-owned enterprises are bad inherently. A lot of countries are basically running state-owned enterprises very efficiently. But given Pakistan's economic framework right now, we cannot afford to have these leakages in our economy.
But when we talk about this whole restructuring process, how we are going to work with other stakeholders like other businesses and international organizations?
So what currently we can also do is that we can start taxing the non-productive sectors in our economy. Generally, investment rates in Pakistan are very low, and people prefer to invest in areas that are unfortunately non-productive. That would probably, I'm like pointing towards the real estate sector. I'm talking about like housing societies. People are not investing because they don't have any options. They don't have efficient options that would like give them the returns that they're looking for. Industrialization in Pakistan is very low. Stock market in Pakistan is always very, not reliable. So real estate is like somewhere where people feel that they can basically get the returns that are that they require. I think like that needs to be taxed as well. So that's like one area where we can look at.
Diversification is
Diversification,
necessary.
yeah. And then obviously Hamayoun Sahab pointed out very correctly that the agriculture sector of Pakistan needs reform as well. Pakistan has one of the lowest per acre yields in the region. And the fact that Pakistan is fundamentally an agricultural country and we have to import most of our for our agricultural needs, that's like somewhere we need to reflect and increase this production as well. So there's like a holistic recipe needed. And again, all parties need to sit together and like decide.
Right. So, Mr. Sajid, when we talk about whole restructuring process, what impact would it have on different sectors of Pakistan's economy?
Yes, exactly. I think let me just club in that how we need at least 3 fundamental shifts if we really have to structure our economy. I mean, Sheharyar also mentioned on tax to GDP ratio. You know that Bangladesh tax to GDP ratio is less than Pakistan. So it is not the ratios actually. They are same size of economy, they have low. So 3 things that I think that need to be changed fundamentally. One is on the thinking side. I mean, our love for strong rupee, artificial overvalue of an exchange rate need to go. This has really hurt Pakistan. I mean, there was a study that I was examiner to. It estimates that around $125 billion have been lost to market just to keep rupee strong artificially. It's equivalent to almost 20 IMF programs that we are having. So similarly, taxation in Pakistan is only for taxation for revenue extraction. We need to change it from taxation for development, taxation to promote businesses. That is actually that we need to. So on a thinking level, we also need some fundamental shifts.
Right.
Also, we need our love to weaken the monetary policy that need to go. No country can have a sustainable development progress without an effective, independent central bank. We don't need to compromise the autonomy of State Bank of Pakistan.
Right, but so let's talk about the sectors, 1, 2, 3,
yeah,
what
exactly.
sectors would be?
Again, coming to sectors, I think we need a fundamental diversification of our economy. Our reliance on textile sector and those 3 to 4 sectors need to go. Because over the last 40 years,
like Sheharyar sahab already mentioned that we need to diversify.
Yeah, they have not been able to sort of compete globally without active subsidies. And I think those subsidies will not be available the way they have been available. So those sectors also need to sort of redesign themselves. And I think one area that will be critical, that will be efficient energy production in Pakistan. One of the biggest risks to Pakistan is the energy sector. Whenever there is a global oil price increase, Pakistan has a very serious balance of payment crisis because we need import oil for energy production. And I think this is one way I would like to highlight 2 opportunities, and that also links to your international audience that are coming. The one is the green energy transition. Pakistan has options, Pakistan have avenues, and it can also help you solve your balance of payment crisis sustainably if you go out of this very inefficient energy production, and domestically it can solve your circular debt problems of Pakistan. Second opportunity that I think in the longer term, medium to longer term, that is GSP plus. Pakistan has not been able to really benefit from GSP plus. While we have had growth in imports and exports, particularly in exports around 80% growth, but this growth has been limited to only 2 to 3 sectors, which are conventional, traditional export sectors.
And
we need
those we have already covered.
Product diversification.
So, Mr. Hamayoun, when we talk about economic restructuring, how the political, factors or the geopolitical factors are going to impact the success of this economic restructuring that we are talking about?
I think it does have an impact, but Dr. Sajid Amin mentioned fundamentally it's our internal thinking. We need to change our thinking, we need to change our ways, and we need to have a vision. Pakistan used to be a country in 60s and 70s which used to have 5-year vision, 5-year plan. and we worked for the first couple of 5 years plan, and we were probably one of the fastest growing economy in South Asia and Asia at that point in time. Somehow down the line, we missed certain opportunities. We got ourselves involved into geopolitics of the world. We started fighting proxy wars for the other countries, and that resulted in, this is a very big debate. But having said that, we have very good neighbors. We have very friendly countries around us, except one or two. But you have China supporting you. You have Saudi Arabia supporting you. As of now, you have Qatar, you have UAE. And as of now, like Iran and Saudi Arabia rapprochement, I think this is also very good news in the recently has come out. So I think we can also benefit from that. Other than that, United States of America is one of the biggest partners with Pakistan, European Union. Dr. Sajid mentioned about GSP Plus, that we did not benefit much from them. Having said that, Pakistan is in a very strategically located position. We could benefit a lot from using geopolitics and focusing on geoeconomics. We need to extend CPEC to Central Asia. We need to have peaceful relationship with our neighbor, and we also need to integrate within our region as well. So these are a lot of things which we can do if there is political stability, if our own house is in order, we're not fighting with each other. And for next 5 to 10 years, there's a continuity of policies. That's fundamentally very, very important to have a better vision for Pakistan.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamayoun Khan, for joining in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sajid Amin.
Can I have just a 30-second intervention?
Sure.
Domestically, I think one of the biggest challenge that we need to correct is NFC, National Finance Commission.
Right.
That is one of the key root problems. We need to balance state and provinces. Partnership in economic revival.
Right, that
will come from NFC.
Right, very significant point. Thank you very much for joining in today's program and for your inputs. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining in today's program. In today's program, we discussed about Pakistan's ongoing talks with IMF to secure a bailout package, and this is going to be significant for Pakistan's struggling economy. But a lot need to be done for keeping our house in order as well. We will be talking more about it in our coming programs, but that's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.